Welcome back, everyone. For the last video in this lecture series, we'll be covering Vrooms model. This is a model that can be difficult to grasp, and it's certainly one of the more difficult models that we'll go over, especially in the second section. So definitely feel free to reach out to me if at the end of this video you still have questions about the model. Diving into it here, and basically with this model, there are two different types of expectations we'll talk about. There's the can I do it expectation, and there's the what are the consequences expectation. This can also be conceptualized as will various outcomes lead to these consequences that I want. And so, yeah, this can I do it expectation between action and outcome here is a self-efficacy expectation versus this here, the what are the consequences expectations more in line with what we've already gone over in terms of expectations. And so basically, in a broad scope of this model, we're getting after will certain actions that we do lead to various outcomes, and will those outcomes lead to desired consequences? Another key component, the second key component here that we need to focus on is that of values. So how valuable are these outcomes and consequences for us? And so there are two expected value equations in this model that we'll be talking about. We'll be thinking about, is it worthwhile to try and achieve certain outcomes, and are the consequences then worthwhile? Will if we're expecting a certain outcome to lead to a various consequence, does that matter for us? Do we care about that consequence anyways? And so I think with this model, it might actually be easier to think about it backwards. And so we can start off, and we'll get into a couple examples for this, but we can start off thinking about a consequence in terms of a long-term goal. So what is a long-term goal that you are trying to achieve? What is some mediating outcome that will occur when working towards this more long-term consequence or goal? And what is a more immediate action that I can take to get to that mediating outcome? And so this is kind of the grand scope here of Vroom's model. Again, for an action to an outcome, can I do this action? Can I reach this outcome? Do I believe that I have the self-efficacy to do this? And is that outcome worth it to begin with? And then from moving from outcome to consequence, what are the consequences? Do I know what consequences might come from this? And do I care about these consequences? Are they valuable to me? And so, in other words, doing the action achieves the outcome, which leads to a consequence. Moving from action to outcome, we can think about that more in terms of a expected value of an action being motivation, and then from outcome to consequence, the expected value here being the value of that action. And so two equations that really need to be conceptualized and remembered here are including both those expectations and the values, right? And so we can talk about determining this outcome value, expected value for this being determined by the equation of, is that consequence desirable? And will this outcome that I am achieving, will that lead to this consequence that I want? So the combination of those two things leads to this outcome value. The other equation that is really important in Vroom's model is the combination of the outcome value. So again, is this outcome valuable in eventually achieving that long-term consequence or goal? And can I do the action to get to the outcome? Again, this is the self-efficacy aspect. Can I do this? And the combination of these two things leads to motivation to act a certain way, do a certain behavior, to acquire or gain whatever outcome is being used in this model here. And so a possible example here, again, I think it is easier to work backwards. And so let's say our long-term consequence or goal here is to get a job. And so we're deciding, trying to figure out the best path to get that job, right? And so one option that might help us to get a certain job might be an internship. And so figuring out the value of this outcome, right? We wanted to decide, is it worth it to get this consequence? Do I really want this job? And what is the consequence? Again, we've already talked about here as that being the job, but obviously that has to be determined in order to figure out the value of that consequence. And then for the internship aspect, working towards trying to get that internship, we have to decide from a motivational standpoint, can I do this? Do I have the self-efficacy belief that I can accomplish this thing? Can I get this internship? And do I want it? Is this internship really going to help me get the desired long-term goal of getting a job? Another example here, we can think about this, and I kind of laid it out differently here. Hopefully this is helpful. Um, I can think about a long-term goal of being healthy as well. So that will be our consequence in this example. And so a mediating outcome of that could be maybe you want to lose 10 pounds that were tacked on during quarantine, or improve your cardio, add muscle mass, whatever, maybe eat healthier, whatever, being healthier is for you. And so the outcome valence or value, right, is determined by the subjective value of being healthy. How important is that to you? Is that a consequence that you want? As well as what is the likelihood that losing weight or improving cardio, adding muscle mass, eating better, et cetera, what is the likelihood that is going to lead to this consequence that you want of being healthy? Additionally, with the action, uh, so this other equation here, right? One of the two equations, let's say the action could be, in order to get to this outcome, could be going to the gym 3 times a week. And so the motivation for this action based on Vroom's model would be determined by the value of losing weight, right? Do we, or improving cardio, adding muscle mass, do we think that this is going to lead to the consequence? So is this important to us? Is this actually going to get us to where we want to be? And self-efficacy, again, can I reach this outcome? Can I lose the 10 pounds? Can I improve my cardio, whatever that looks like? Can I add X amount of muscle mass, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yeah, I hope these two examples have been able to cover and make sense of the two equations that are really important for Vroom's model. And these are the aspects that I want you to be able to know and to use in examples for the exam. So be able to do both of the calculations for the outcome value as well as the action motivation. A couple of real life examples for the use of Vroom's model. And so we can use career choice. This is actual empirical research here. And so what these researchers basically looked at was whether certain careers would lead to desired consequences, or in other words, do people actually choose these careers based on expectancy and valence? And they did indeed find this, where both expectancy in general, both expectancy and valence were pretty highly associated with the probability of choosing a certain career. The difference here is relative to kind of the math models, the two equations again that we've talked about. It's a little bit different. Doesn't seem as though expectancy and valence are actually being multiplied together per se, but they're both just being used um, to predict wanting a certain desired consequence. Another example here is person environment fit. And so we can think about this in terms of person organization fit. This seems to be very important for outcomes such as job satisfaction. And so it's a combination here, right, of the individual and the job or the environment to predict the desired outcome of liking your job, or getting consequences such as whatever pay scale you're hoping to receive, whatever lifestyle, things like that. And it is also predictive of job performance. And so getting at that kind of expectancy aspect, right? If this is important for me, it's leading to outcomes and consequences that are valuable for me, and I have the self-efficacy based on this fit. I think that I can do my job and I can do it well. I'm going to see more motivation here, and job performance is going to improve. And all right, that is it for this video and for this series of lectures.